So today is part 3 of this Sega Genesis portable project I'm working on, and today is all about the controller, and we're going to be trying to figure out how to wire this controller up directly to the motherboard, bypassing a whole bunch of stuff. If you've seen my part 1 about the planning and the motherboard cut, and then part 2 about powering this thing, we're on the controller right now. So what we're doing is we're literally just going to try to get the IC that's on this controller board, and we're going to figure out what buttons go to where on the IC, and then where the IC goes to on the motherboard by bypassing the whole cord and all of that. So first thing to figure out where the buttons go is we need to just look at the traces on it, and then it's really simple. We just look at the traces, trace them back, and then check continuity with a multimeter from the trace to the IC. Because there's a 6-button Genesis controller, it has more buttons than there are pins on the controller, so we need to know where they all go. So right now I'm using a scratch pen to scratch off the solder mask on the actual board, so we can check continuity from the exposed copper trace directly to the leg of the IC. And after checking a whole bunch with the multimeter to figure out where everything goes, we figured it all out, and then we write it down. So we know that the top pins of the IC is basically your up, down, left, right, start, BYX, all those buttons. So we figured all that out. Now we need to figure out where the bottom pins go to these solder points of the controller. Or those are the ones that go to the controller wire. So now we're just tracing it all back, and basically we're just looking at the traces. It's really easy to see that one, and then just creating a drawn diagram of it, because our goal is to that IC to just solder it directly to the motherboard, and then solder the other legs of it directly to buttons inside this portable. So we're also going to make a nicer diagram a little later on that's a little bit more coherent than just some random scribbles. So now that we've figured out where the IC goes to each pin of the controller port, we need to figure out which one of those pins goes where on the plug, and then when it's plugged into the controller port on the motherboard, where they go there. And then there's these EM capacitors. I don't know, they're just labeled on the motherboard EM, and they're these like the capacitor type things that Sega uses for all of their controllers on every motherboard revision of all of their systems. And we're going to try to figure out where these points go directly on that, so we could cut off the actual controller port of the motherboard, making the motherboard even smaller. So basically it's going to go directly to those capacitors. And right here, this is me basically just double checking my work to make sure that each pin on the controller port, I know where it goes on the motherboard, and double checking all of that. And then, like I said, like writing it all down, keeping track. Basically, this is just me tracing back everything with a multimeter with continuity to figure out what goes where. And essentially, you could just plug the whole thing in, open up the controller, and then on the IC itself, take that and then connect that pin to the bottom of the motherboard to see where they go. And then on the bottom of this motherboard, you see, like I said, you could just look at the traces. You see how the controller port connector goes directly to those 3-prong EM capacitor things. And we're also creating a little map for that. And then so that way we can just cut out all the middlemen. So yeah, that's me figuring out the controller. This actually took a while because it all had to be like properly documented, as you see my random scribbles on the paper. Even though that's not a proper document, whatever, that's really all it is. Now we're tracing all these ones back to the controller pins, to the weird little capacitors, because 2 of them actually go to little resistors, which we then had to check from continuity from the bottom of the board to the top, which you see, which I just did really, really fast. And there's me drawing the diagram of where they all go to on those little EM capacitor things. I don't even know what they are. But I know the middle pin for all of them is ground, and then the first pin comes in from the controller port, and the second pin goes to the main chip on the Sega Genesis. So here, like I said, some of them go to resistors, And then here's actually the really nice diagram that I decided to make. So I just want to say real quick, I'll explain this diagram when I'm done making it, but thank you guys very much for like being involved in this and like watching and like seeing the whole progress. I thought it'd be really cool to show the whole progress of like teaching myself how to do this. So here's the diagram I made so that we can refer to it later on. And then there's the bottom with all the EM capacitors of what numbers they all are. And then there it goes to the numbers which go to the IC, and then the top of the IC, which is basically your actual buttons. And we need this information because even though I just figured it all out right now and I wired up that controller to the motherboard and tested it and it works, we don't need this information just yet because we're going to need this after all the way at the end when we assemble the entire thing. But it's good to know what we need to know now so then we can start hacking it up and then move on to the next part. And the next part of this will be a second motherboard trim where I soldered a bunch of wires and did all this other stuff. And then the part after that will be the whole thing working. If you want to see the status of this, just check on social media or go to the community tab. I actually posted a pic of the motherboard cut right now. So thank you guys all very, very much for being involved with this. I thought it would be a really cool project to like, hey, I'm learning how to do this as I go. Let me make videos of me figuring it out instead of just showing you the final product at the end. So it's a little harder for me to do that, but it's more rewarding and more fun. And I think it would be more entertaining for you guys. So I hope so. All right. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.